today I have a really special person for you. She is multi-talented, multi-boss lady. Her name is Jenny Langer. She sings. She, runs other people's businesses. She runs her own business. But you don't want to hear me talk about it. Let's go ahead and get Jenny on the line. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Trish. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I am really excited to have you on today. Why don't you let people know? Like, I was trying to be, kind of cool with the cats and kittens. I don't know if that really happened, but
I like
you let people know who you are.
reference. What are you talking about?
It's all right. It's all good. It's all good. Just just trying a little bit of something to keep the variety going. You know what I'm saying? Just keep people a little bit interested. They're like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I basically have two full-time jobs normally, and they're very closely intertwined. So I think some people might know me as one more than the other, depending on what industry you're in and how we met. But by day, I'm an entertainment producer and specialist over at East Coast Entertainment.
Right.
I work out of our Washington, D.C. office, but we have over 14 brick and mortar locations throughout the U.S. We are the country's largest entertainment agency in terms of roster and reach. And I love working with such creative people on a daily basis, and artists in particular. And part of that is because I'm also an artist myself. So by night and on the weekends, I am a performing musician and band leader. And that's part of how I came to know about East Coast Entertainment, because they were booking a band that I was working in. And I really liked how the company operated, how they were honest with their artists, how they seemed to do really forthright business with people. And they had great relationships with companies who had been in the event industry for decades. I think that speaks a lot to a company's character when you see that. So I work both sides of the desk.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that relationship because you've been with them for quite some time. I mean, certainly as for as long as I've known you, which
Well,
has been several years.
yeah, 12 years. And it went by
Yeah.
like that. It's funny, my 12-year anniversary was in April, and we had this Zoom call with the company, and people were congratulating different birthdays and anniversaries. And we've even had a couple company babies be born since this all started. So, a lot
Oh,
of personal news, in our group. And I said, yeah, 12 years went by like that. And this last month felt like 12 years. So,
so
here,
so now you've got a solid 24 in the industry. We'll just call it 24. In
I'll take
dog
it.
years.
I'll take it.
Well, but that's really amazing, and it goes, exactly to what you were talking about. That it's got to be a really great company, right? Because keep hearing all these things as lay people out there in the news about this artist getting screwed and that one getting a shaft deal, and this one just like not reading her contract right, and now she's kind of like locked into something she didn't know what she was getting into.
Right.
So having that relationship with a company that you personally can vouch for and say, hey, yeah, you should be signing with me or doing business through East Coast Entertainment because we treat our artists right.
Absolutely.
That's huge.
Yeah, and honestly, one of my biggest joys of being an entertainment producer and booking agent is that as a performer, I have so many close friends and colleagues who do perform for a living, and to be able to offer them work that pays them fairly for how hard they work and how talented they are feels wonderful. So often we talk about the live music scene, and if you're not famous, there's a very large gray area in between garage band and famous, and it can be
Right.
hard to sustain a family on the income that comes with that. A lot of folks will moonlight as entertainers and they have a day job. And if you want to stay true to your craft, that's important to you, and you don't want those distractions, finding a way to be able to pay your rent, pay your bills, um, strictly as an entertainer is a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, it's definitely, it speaks volumes. But what I'm really fascinated, I'm gonna take a little side trip because what I'm really fascinated by is that background you've got going on. Can we talk about what is happening on your wall?
We can talk about this.
Yeah.
This is my dining room.
Oh,
actually.
wow.
We
Oh
turned
my
our
God.
into kind of a concert poster art gallery. Um, I I live with my fiance. He should have been my husband as of May 3rd, but we were one of the many weddings
Yeah.
that postponed due to the situation.
Right.
He's not a musician, but he's a massive music lover. Goes to probably more concerts than I get to go to. So
Wow.
combined, we have a pretty large concert poster collection. So these are just our favorites. It's not everything, but it keeps it fun, and you definitely know whose dining room you're walking into when you come over to the house.
That's for sure. Well, you and I have had that conversation about like how the two of you met, and how it was, I've often felt that it's kind of important, especially when you're in an artistic field or creative field, to have someone that appreciates the creativity or is maybe creative but in a completely different lane, is important. And do you find that having him, I mean, he clearly is an appreciator. He appreciates what you do. He's a lover of what you do.
Yeah,
But he doesn't have his hands in it. So
right.
does that like help you?
I think so. I think
Yeah,
any creative field, whether you're a photographer, whether you're a musician, even planners, I mean, that's a creative field. I consider that to be an art form in and of itself. Being with someone who supports what you do, maybe the strange hours that we all work. This is not necessarily a 9 to 5, just like being a planner is not just a 9 to 5. You're there. You are there as soon as your vendors load in to the last guest leaving, probably. So not every partner can be understanding of that. And it's just the two of
it's
us
true.
and a couple of fur babies. So it's not like children here that are running around that we're trying to manage. But for those folks that do, having a partner that is willing to pick up, that extra work if you're not available during traditional hours, can be hard to find. But he supports what I do. He attends as many shows as he can. Yesterday, I was
Fabulous.
streaming via Facebook, and I use an open broadcast software,
Right.
and I need a little help if I'm in front of the camera performing for someone to be driving the screen if we're using graphics. So I taught him how to do that, and he was nervously producing our live stream yesterday. But that's just how supportive he is, and I very much appreciate
No, and I appreciate him because being as someone now who's like, I've got like this whole like broadcast thing going on in front of me, and I've got like, my phone, on one of the channels just to make sure that we're still live and that this isn't going into dead air.
it.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally appreciate that. But you touched on a really interesting point. Let's talk about these live performances that you're doing. Because of course, like as you mentioned, you have the East Coast Entertainment, and, this company that you love, but you're a performer too. And so how has that been? Like I'm sure you had, 100 gigs that had to either be like canceled or rescheduled. So what's going on?
Girl. Yes,
Everything? Yeah.
everything. I mean, as things were starting to close and the world was watching to see how serious this was, are
Yeah.
we actually going to shut down businesses? And if we do, how extreme and when does that happen? And when you're an event performer or a concert performer, it's all date based. And so we're looking
Yeah.
at the calendar. We're like, well, how long can we hold out until they absolutely won't open their doors and nobody will come? And so that was tough in the beginning, and also for me as a band leader, because I feel very responsible for my musicians that look to me for work and they say no to other offers because they've already said yes to me. I feel very
Right.
responsible for that. And so trying to continuously communicate with your team and say this one's a question mark, this one's been canceled, this one's been postponed. It's almost been a full-time job in and of itself, only because we do about 125 shows a year,
Wow.
um, between public and private performances. So it's a lot, and to look at what's happened just since March, it's been a whirlwind. But a lot of
Yeah.
musicians very quickly saw that, well, we need to replace this somehow. I can't just sit back. and this is my only source of income. And what do I do now? And so overnight, thousands of musicians had to become streaming experts for better or worse. I think people are now getting a lot better at it, but initially it was interesting to see the setups that some folks were using. And my band streamed for the first time through Pearl Street Warehouse's social media channel.
All right. Yeah.
And that was wonderful because they have a lot of followers. So it was a collaborative effort where we were obviously providing the entertainment, they were providing the audience, and it helped us gain views. And in turn, people were using the virtual tip jar, which allowed me to still offer these musicians a little bit of pay at the end of the day for all their effort. That was great.
Yeah.
Since
Amazing. Well, and it's one of those things where I think that as people are kind of getting accustomed to whatever the new reality is, I think that people are appreciative of that. Whereas they might not, 3 months ago, this might have been like a novelty thing, like,
right,
maybe I'll tune in, maybe I won't. But now people are paying attention, and that's huge.
I think people are craving that connection.
Yeah.
And for the artists that are able to interact with folks as people are leaving comments, it's not the same as being there in person, but we're trying to get close to that experience. And to see familiar faces, performing familiar music, and saying hi to you, in the process, I think is bringing a lot of people joy and connection and maybe even a little bit of stress relief to know that they're not on this island by themselves during this situation. There are some musicians that are
Huh.
really killing the streaming game, though. I'm
Okay.
trying hard to do what I can, but I'm not a tech expert. But Justin Treywick is a local DC musician. He's very well known. He works with our agency, but he also sells out, a ton of public venues throughout DC when he does his original concerts. He's been going live at least twice a week, and
Nice.
and his streams became so popular. CNN sent a camera crew, maybe cameraman, maybe it was just one person given the
Right.
situation.
Right.
They
It's like one guy in a
to
hazmat suit. Right.
right head to toe
Right.
to his living room to record how he does his streams and what the mission is behind it right now and how well it's going. So I was so proud of him to see that pop up on CNN. Like, oh my God, it's Justin. So it's nice that some folks are getting recognition for. I hate this word right now. We're overusing it for having pivoted towards virtual events. And if we
Yeah. Yeah.
needed a replacement word for pivot during our chat here, I would love that. You and I should take a stab at that effort.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people right about now, I think you're right. I think a lot of people are getting really sensitive to certain key phrases, like in the events industry, like people keep talking about social distancing, and I think that going forward, it's going to be important for us to use phrases like physical distancing because,
Yeah.
nobody wants to be an event planner of a socially distant event that just kind of doesn't ring right. But yeah, but I think pivot. I've always been a fan of the word hustle. I feel like this is the time where like the true hustlers are going to hustlers are gonna hustle.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you're out there and you're like, well, I don't know if this is a true pivot. Well, let's just call it like a different hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks are getting very creative right now with how they're going to approach their businesses. And, if they need to change things to keep up with the times, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of creativity, and it takes a willingness to be courageous in that moment. You didn't want to change your business, but now you have to. So,
Yeah, now there's no choice.
right.
And of course, like we were talking before about technical issues, and I was saying like if there's not something wacky that happens during this interview, then it's going to be like an unusual interview. But that's okay. Why don't you tell us about like what your views are on the future of events and like things that how do you see this all going forward in the future?
Yeah, I'm a perpetual optimist, but I'm also a Virgo, so I have that little voice in the back of my head at all times. That's the realist as well. But I do mean what I say when when we're talking about how I think people are going to crave that connection moving forward. And so it's going to be an interesting balance of keeping the safety um, and the safety of guests, the comfort of guests, because even though maybe your city says that something is now safe to do, it doesn't mean that people are going to be comfortable doing it. But at the same time, still providing a way for people to connect in some capacity. I know that for us over at East Coast, we took a pretty quick um, stand in offering some articles through the company blog on how people can be rescheduling their events but retaining their full vendors, things that are helpful. But now we're starting to look at, well, what does this mean for our entertainers moving forward? How can they be safe doing what they do when being there in person is traditionally what it is? Um, but there are ways to still have entertainment and even events, whether it's less than 10 people, whether it's 50 people or less, or whether you're just trying to be smart in larger group settings. Even though I think some people are having Zoom meeting overload lately, maybe Zoom burnout, I don't think this is the end of virtual meetings. I think that we're going to see conferences and conventions maybe moving to a virtual platform this year. Perhaps you get CEOs or corporate teams in a room where it's maybe 10 people or less, but then the rest of the company is seeing presentations online. But if that's happening, you can still make it fun. You can still make it interactive. You can have comedians hosting your virtual meetings and keeping people awake between the sessions. You can have live music entertainment during a coffee break, or you encourage people to get up and stretch. And here's a guitarist providing you some pleasant music while you take a breather for 10. Getting creative with how we turn our traditional events into a virtual event. I think that'll be what we see this year. I'm optimistic that after summer, we will see gatherings of over 100 people starting to return. Um, but even then, I think we're going to see venues that are still encouraging smarter practices, um, whether it's with catering. I was just talking with some of my team members yesterday, and catering companies are thinking about the future of service. How do we do this safely for people? Family style buffets, can we even do that until 2021? If we're doing plated meals, maybe when people enter, there's already a salad set on the table. So there's, very little interaction with the wait staff. And then they're partnering with their entertainment vendors so that in between courses, people get out of their seats and do something, whether it's dance or there's a game or there's a cocktail hour in another room, and then they come back. And in that time, they turn over the tables with the next course so that you're not having servers, breathing on every single person being that close. Um, and then people having to teach themselves about sanitization for their equipment, where maybe they only had to do that every so many months. Now it's going to be every single day, maybe between every single session. So I think it's doable. I think it's going to be exhausting as people are self-educating in the beginning. But it's what we've got to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. With a lot of events, we're going to see a very hard split between what's the corporate mindset and the social mindset, right? Because you're going to have, obviously, companies and corporations, they have a much different mentality when it comes to liability and what their expectations are and what their goals are for a particular event. When that's out there. So whether that's, if you're out there and, and you're someone who plans company parties or company meetings, or whether you're thinking about, all these meetings that you're going to have to attend in the future, that's something that companies can afford to be a lot more cautious with and a lot more conscientious with. And, and there's not, excuse me, there's not ever been sort of a massive component of physical interaction with corporate events, right? Like, you don't really go to a company party to dance cheek to cheek with a boss, like, what, right? Maybe some companies, I don't know, I'm not judging, I'm just saying. Um, I've heard some stories and I've seen some things. Um, but in a regular company, right. You keep a certain level of physical distance. But, with social events being as that is, everyone's really well intentioned. I think it's going to come down to personal levels of comfort. If like you are up, right now planning a wedding and you're thinking, I don't even know how this is going to work for me. Well, neither do we. Because here's the rub is that, everyone's going to be well intentioned when they walk into the room, right? And it might only be 50 people. You're going to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to be sensitive to everybody. People have been out of work for a while. So financially, I'm going to be sensitive. Physically, I'm going to be sensitive. I'm not going to require these, larger crowds or maybe this, sort of like 200-person packed dance floor. And everyone will come in with that intention. But, a couple of tequilas later, a couple glasses of wine, maybe, a couple of, whiskey and, beer combos, something like that. The people are going to start getting a little bit looser with certainly how they interact with each other. So I think social events, you're right. It's going to take a certain level of commitment on our part, but also a certain level of resolution on the part of the client as well. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Different groups of people are going to respond to this differently as guests, even not just as hosts. I mean, have you ever been to a Greek wedding? Everyone
Right, right.
talking,
Physical distancing not happening. Just
right.
not going to happen.
So even if you attempt to tell someone you can only have 50 guests, I guarantee you they're all going to be very
Right,
together that day.
right. At least by the end of the first course, you
Right.
know, that it's just going to be like, and then by the time you get to dessert, people will be like, you've lived a good life. Come over here. It's going to be a completely different sort of mentality going in,
Yeah.
to all these events for sure. But that's part of it. It's, you want to, like you said, everybody's going to have to sort of sanitize their equipment and be, more conscious about, cognizant of their space and conscious of what's happening around them, as opposed to, before where we could all be a little bit sort of, looser about things. But it's going to all break down to just personal levels of comfort, you know?
Yeah. And I think, beyond the guest experience too, vendors are going to have to come up with a plan before each
Yeah,
event, and they're going to have to do it together.
right.
They're going to be aware of the steps that each other are taking to be extra cautious and to make sure that the health and safety of the guests are in place. And if there are, I don't want to say rules, but if venues are requiring certain things, we're only going to use these entrances and we're only going to use these exits, and we're requiring masks and gloves behind the scenes, and people are going to really have to work together on this. But I think this industry, anybody who's successful in the event industry is a collaborative type of person. And we're used to having a game plan with each other before most events. So this will just be an additional component to that.
Yeah, and I think you're making an excellent point for an excellent argument for people to be using planners.
Mhm.
Just
Yes.
a little shameless plug right there. Um, it's all good.
It's going to be,
But certainly have some, certainly having a plan, having, a run of show, having, like, if it's a corporate event, having a show caller, you're going to need it. You're going to need that blueprint walking in.
right. And if you are attempting a larger scale physical event, the later part of 2020, if we're allowed to, I think even having a planner that's helping you figure out, well, exactly how many people can we safely fit in this room? It's not just about capacity anymore. It's
Right.
about between tables and chairs and staff members. And if you're trying to plan your own wedding and that's something that you're trying to figure out, I mean, I think any normal bride is going to instantly turn into a stressed out bride just with that alone.
Right, because nobody wants to feel like they're going to kill, Grandma Betty, with accidentally. Like poor grandma, she lived through, she lived through three wars, but but your wedding's going to be the one that kills her. You don't want to be responsible for that. So certainly there is a certain level of anxiety and fear. I think that people are going to have, walking into certain events, going into the future. But but some people have talked a little bit about sort of the like holograms, which I don't know. I mean, what do you feel about holograms? I think that I've never personally seen live entertainment as something that might be physically hazardous. Like that's not the physically hazardous component, right? Like ultimately, a live entertainer is going to be on stage performing at a distance from you. So really, you might be more concerned with the bartender than you are with the guitarist. But talking about that like the whole technical aspect of adding these new things.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think firstly with entertainment, there's a big wide world of what that word means, and I
Right.
use the word entertainment as an umbrella word.
Hmm.
But I think most people, when it comes to special events, they think of a band or a musical act on a stage. But there's also what I call streetmosphere. So roaming entertainment or interactive stations, or even if you have an Instagram station that has a live person there, that's still interactive entertainment. There is quite a bit of categories of entertainment that would put people within close proximity of each other. But then beyond that, with your bands, people are on stage together. And if you have an 8-person band and they all need to be 6 feet or more apart from each other, maybe your 12 by 20 standard stage is not going to provide that. Um, we've been talking about within our company some guidelines that we're going to start recommending to entertainers for the rest of the year. I think that there's going to be little way to extremely enforce all of this, but these will be suggestions that we recommend they bring up to clients or planners before going into an event. One of them being stage size, not just for the performers from each other, but how much distance is between the front line and your guests. I've performed many events where guests were right here. Or they jump up on stage because they're having a great time and they want to have a moment with the band. And normally an entertainer would welcome that. You want them to feel like they're part of the moment because they are. It's all about them. You're not there necessarily giving a concert, you're providing entertainment for their special day. But we might have to say, I'm sorry, no, for your safety, and that could be an awkward moment. But we're going to recommend that artists consider not allowing those types of interactions. Um, yeah, when it comes to the virtual entertainment, I personally have mixed feelings about that. I know that festivals like Coachella, for example, have experimented with holographic entertainers. There's a
Yeah.
wonderful Cirque du Soleil show in Las Vegas that is all based on the music of Michael Jackson, and they were using holograms of him on stage. I'm one of these people, especially when it comes to famous performers who are no longer with us, which seems to have been the reason to use a hologram instead of the real life person. Leave them be. If they're gone, they're gone. And bringing them
Right.
back to holograms, I think is it's a little sacrilegious and a little strange to me. But when I was watching this Vegas show, this Michael Jackson Vegas show a couple years ago, watching that scene, I was thinking, well, it's beautiful and the dancers are amazing. I don't know how I feel about this Michael Jackson hologram. And I had one of my very close friends in Vegas with me, and I look at her and she's crying. Like
Wow.
she was watching Michael Jackson dance. So I think different people have different reactions to virtual entertainment.
Yeah, I think like what kind of sparked that was like that recent thing with Whitney Houston,
Yeah.
where they did that show and it didn't quite look like Whitney. Like it was Whitney, but it didn't quite look like Whitney, and it was just weird.
Just book
Um,
an impersonator, you know?
yeah.
Like
Right, right. There are so many people out there that will, give you a real, human, and I think that's just as valid to book an impersonator. as opposed to booking the, a hologram. Although you might pay that, you're going to pay the hologram less. There's that.
I feel like there's fewer technical glitches that come with, say, a tribute band than with a hologram. But you know what? I'm no tech wizard, so perhaps I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, well, and it's all that sort of just strange arena. And you mentioned tribute bands. Now, of course, like through your band, Moonshine Society, that's all original. Your own work. So, are you the writer? Are you like the creative? Is it a group process, or like who does your music? Like, who creates that music?
Sure. For the original music that we currently perform, I'm the songwriter on all of it. Um,
Fabulous.
Once I bring kind of a skeleton of a song to the guys, normally there's either charts or we talk about it ahead of time. And a lot of these songs kind of get fleshed out right there on stage. Um, I'm a blues musician primarily, and so I'm lucky in that our idiom, a lot of these players are wonderful improvisers on stage. So I can give them a key, I can give them a tempo, I can say, this is how the bridge is going to go, and then we'll just do it. And they don't get flustered on stage in front of people in that kind of improv moment, very similar to jazz musicians. Um, but if I was a Nashville country artist and this was, that type of music, it'd be much harder to maybe do that on the fly in front of a live audience.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a whole different sort of setup. It's a whole different expectation from the audience,
Yeah.
as well. What percentage of your business, like, if you were to say like percentage of the business that you is you, you know, acting on your own behalf versus acting on ECE's behalf, is it like a good mix for you, or like, is it 30-50 or
Well, with East Coast Entertainment, as a booking agent, I am working on behalf of our artists, but also our clients. We have two clients at the same time. It's usually, whether it's a bride or a planner, they're my client as much as the band leaders who are providing the entertainment are. And that's a full-time job, absolutely. And then
yeah.
some, because at East Coast, I'm not just a booking agent, but I'm also a producer. I think that I created a bit of a niche for myself in DC, working specifically with creative events. Of course, I love working with wedding planners and social event planning, and a lot of that can be fun. But there's more of a production need when it comes to these larger events. So the galas that want champagne aerialists and models when you come in, and they want living statues in the corners, and you need someone running that show and coordinating all those people if that's going to happen. So I enjoy
Yeah.
doing it. And then on top of it, the 125 concerts a year with Moonshine Society. And we have an offshoot called Moonshine that specifically does private events. So it's not just the original music that the festival club band does, but we also do Southern Soul and Motown. I'm not out there, doing Dua Lipa or Lady Gaga. There's plenty of bands that focus on that stuff, and
Right.
if that's what you want, I can tell you who to book if that's if that's what you're desiring. We are more of a Southern Soul Motown horn based group for the private stuff. So between the two versions of the band, it keeps me very busy.
Yeah, you are an amazingly busy person. That has always struck me. And we were just talking before about like self care and how that's important. We were talking, I had complimented you on your shirt. I thought that it was a really fabulous shirt, and but you were saying that like you and I are of the like mind that even during these times, keeping up with certain habits is important.
I think so.
Like what kind of habits, like you've already told me, but obviously, no one else was in on that conversation. So, just let everybody know, like what things do you do being as you're so massively busy, between just to keep yourself sane.
Sure. Well, I think recognizing what your body is telling you it needs is important. I think
Yeah.
a lot of us in this industry, we will run ourselves ragged if given the opportunity because there's no shortage of work that you can be doing. So
Right.
I need to be productive to feel like I'm being successful. That's not necessarily always accurate or healthy. Um, for me, right now, with the situation, I'm still renting clothes. I use Rent the Runway, but there's other services like it too.
Right.
Um, Before the world push the pause button, uh, renting clothes makes so much more sense than buying clothes because if I'm out and about at events all the time, I need something more than jeans and t-shirt or even just traditional business wear. If you're producing at a gala, you need a gown. If you're singing at a big concert, you need something fly on stage. I can't afford to be buying all those clothes all the time, so let's just run.
Right.
But now that we're working from home, you know, dressing up, putting on your makeup, brushing your hair, I think just puts you in a mental space that says, I'm showing up today. Even if it's virtually, I'm still showing up today and I'm not going to write the day off. Um, Beyond that, I would love to say getting sleep is a priority. It is now a priority. I think it keeps
Yeah.
stress levels, at a good spot. But before, I used to say that my secret to sustaining, these two full-time careers was no children, no sleep. And if I ever want either of those things, something will have to change. Um,
Right.
but lately, resisting the urge to stay up till 5 a.m., get up at 10 a.m., and do it all over again. You know, Thinking about my health uh, and working out right now. I know that it's hard to motivate ourselves when gyms are closed and there's nowhere to go and get out of the house, get some sunshine, get some fresh air, move your body for 30 minutes. I guarantee you'll feel better afterwards, even if it's a struggle to get started. Uh, but keeping that in mind during this time, especially, has been important. It'd be so easy to sit on the
Yeah.
couch all day during this.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of pretty easy to fall in on some sort of like unhealthy habit, or something that, and certainly like those first couple of weeks, I think we all took the sucker punch to the gut.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that we were all just kind of feeling in that mode, like, okay, we just all need to breathe, at this point in time. But taking that time to just kind of just be with yourself and say, you know what, is it a really horrible situation? Yes. But can we use something in this situation to our advantage at this point in time? Also a yes.
Yeah.
So it's figuring that out, and whatever that kind of means for you.
Yeah.
And certainly, and you've, being so well tapped into multiple markets, is the DC market, do you find, has it been, as affected? Is it, are we experiencing the same thing here that you're finding with other markets elsewhere in terms of
Ooh.
like, how people are responding?
Yeah, I think that here, people are on the in our daily lives. People in DC, I think, are more on top of what's happening in the news and with government. It goes with the territory. I mean, you can't listen to the radio here and not find
Yeah.
news radio looking through. Um, so I think that people are, actively tuning in every single day to see what the situation is, and maybe that's causing a little bit more anxiety than areas that are a little bit more spread out and not so government focused. I will say that I have high hopes, and I hope that this isn't too sensitive of a topic for some of our watchers, but higher hopes for the restaurant industry of DC than I do for maybe more rural areas throughout America. Um, I've spoken with some artists and some friends who live in different
Hmm.
states where restaurants are not doing to go food and they're not doing to go alcohol. They're just shut. And at least here in DC, these businesses have the green light to be doing a little bit of business, whatever business they can, without allowing people in. And I think that although we all expect some businesses to maybe close their doors after all this is done or while it's happening because they can't afford to stay open. I think the ones that can continue bringing in a little bit of income will stand a better chance of sustaining themselves until we get to a place of normalcy. Seems like such a strange word these days, normalcy. But I have higher hopes for the larger cities that are allowing that than the smaller cities out there for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting push going forward. But I think that you're right. I think that we're such a takeout, we're such an eat out culture here in DC to begin with. And that hasn't always been the case. I've been in the area since 2013, but I had a long backstory. I'm originally from the New York area, um, and I received an invitation when I was living up in New York to come live in the DC area. I didn't do that at the time, but even in the transformation in the last 7 years here has been tremendous between the food scene and the event scene and the entertainment scene. I think we've really kind of come into our own. So, whereas I think that we've always been, DC has always been considered maybe, like for definitely for sure a secondary market, but in some cases even a tertiary market. We're
Yeah.
now kind of, jumping to the head of the line in all of that.
Yeah, and here in DC too, I think there's a lot of government jobs here, and there's also a lot of tech jobs here. And some of these folks with their government jobs are essential workers. And then, of course, tech companies, maybe you can work from home and there's not a ton of change to your workflow. So I think just given the industries that are prominent in DC, folks financially are doing a little bit better off. They're able to continue buying from restaurants even though they can't
Right.
eat in them. They're able to watch these virtual concerts and tip musicians and artists that they appreciate. I think our city's economy is staying afloat because of the industries that we have here. I'm not quite sure how smaller cities are handling that, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for sure once we kind of get out of it and establish who has had to essentially close business and move on, and who has been able to stay afloat. I think that more than anything is going to be a really I mean whether we like it or not, we are forever changed by what's happened across the board. So, it's gonna be interesting. Although I have this like weird, vision of the future where we're all sort of like in some sort of weird red light district where it's kind of like I've never been to Amsterdam's red light district, little disclaimer. So I only imagine this is so. But when you see it in the movies and it's like that one street and all the girls are lined up in front of the windows, so you can like window shop for the girls in the red light district. I kind of feel like entertainment's going to be one of those things, and like restaurants where everybody's just going to be walking down the street single file, and then you're going to see like bands up in the windows, kind of like, and then you could go maybe like plug in your headset or something really crazy like that. Just is weird, weird new setup, right?
Well, I
I think
think
that would be hilarious.
people are even starting to find their own weird setups. I know
Yeah.
there are vineyards that are hiring musicians to perform live as people come to pick up, their wine of the month orders,
All
or
right.
that there's something
Sure.
interactive happening as they're there. I mentioned Pearl Street Warehouse. We did their streaming concert series starting next Wednesday. Every other Wednesday, we're going to be doing the Hamilton's virtual happy hour, and
Ah, yes.
there's still a way to have the loft at the Hamilton open, even though it's just going to be via your computers. But hey, it'll be earlier in the day, and we're still staying connected to our Hamilton family when we do this. So it's just an interesting take on it. I'm seeing some venues also coming up with creative ways to try to go back to business once we enter into phase two, phase three.
Right.
Some are talking about, distancing seats apart a certain distance, maybe doing two shows back to back on the same date instead of just one show. And that way they'll sell half the number of tickets that they would normally do, so that they can provide that social space between people to have them feel safe. Do away with intermissions so there's no rush for the bar or rush for the bathrooms in between the show. And they're still seeing the same amount of money come in if they're selling the same number of tickets on the same day, even though it's two separate shows. Um, I think some artists will actually go for that idea if it means that they're still able to perform, even though it means performing twice as much on the same day. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I think that I think you're right. I think that it, in terms of the artists and in terms of, anyone who really has to get in front of an audience and perform in any way, right? Because what we're talking about here is about artists going in front of people and performing, but this is something that is transferable to anybody that gets in front of people, whether that is a speaker, at sort of live, live function, a teacher that might be teaching a session, or a corporate leader that might be leading a keynote. So, all of this is going to affect anybody who gets in front of a large group of people to, entertain or, give out information or do whatever they're doing. I think that for at least a little bit of time, that people, you're right. I think that people are just going to be working twice as hard, because they want to reach the same amount of people. It's just that you're, not going to be able to do that, in the same amount of time anymore. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. And these virtual performances
Yeah.
have been a very interesting social experiment. I've noticed that for myself as a performer, when we're streaming, we're hitting more people in more countries at the same time, far more than we could have ever done at a live concert. And then it's archived online forever, so people can go back and watch again. In some cases, especially with what bands make at bars and clubs, the virtual tip jars have been very kind to us so far. And even though we're not performing as much as we were when we do, we're seeing just as much from virtual tip jars as had we been playing at a venue itself. So that's been nice. Um, and then also
Yeah.
adapting to performing without an audience in front of you. I don't think I ever realized how much I feed off that energy in the room. And it's not just people applauding in between songs, but it's people dancing while you're playing a song. It's people singing along when you're playing a song. And to then be doing it to a screen and in between songs there's silence. It's like, this is so strange. Like in my head I have to imagine people while I do this. Otherwise it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I was actually, for the late night shows, I watched The Daily Show and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So I was thinking about you last night when I was watching The Colbert Show, because he's talked about that, where, there's like a comedic sense of timing. And I think like, like you're in front of an audience and there's something that you do and you're waiting for that applause and the audience cues you just
Yeah.
as much as, as anything you're doing. So it's missing that component. It's missing that interaction of basically, who you're performing for.
Right. Yeah, pausing for the laughter, right? A
Right.
lot of late night TV hosts, you still see them pausing for the laughter. And I don't know if
Right.
it's training or if they're actually giving people at home the opportunity to laugh before the next joke starts. Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I laugh just because I'm like, why is he pausing? Did he pause for a studio? It's like did he pause for a studio audience that's just not there?
And
So that was just really funny.
yeah.
That was just a whole lot of fun. But yeah, I certainly, I think that a lot of people, I think that once the floodgates open, that so many people are going to want to get out there and hopefully just to go out and have a good time and, interact with like a live band or a live anything.
Yeah.
It's gonna be huge. Because that's the other component we're talking about, right? It's like, everything's shut down now, but once it comes back, to at least 70% of what it was, then that's going to be the flood. Then it's going to be, people are going to, your all your dates are going to be booked out. People are not going to be able to get a seat anywhere. I predict that, having a reservation at dinner is probably going to be like the new Mercedes. Like it's the new status symbol.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, a couple thoughts on that. I think one, we might see a return, at least to some events,
Yeah,
earlier than 70%. I know that for
sure.
our company, we've been designing scalable entertainment since this started. So, with the expectations that there will be some people wanting entertainment for just 10 people, or how can we do this mobilely, so that it's going down the street rather than staying in a static room. How can we do this virtually? How can we do this for just 50 people? So I think a lot of entertainment, not just entertainment, but event industry companies are going to have to think about scaling their services until things go back to, full size events. um, and you're absolutely right. Once everything opens up, floodgates are going to be crazy. Um, I think that also what were previously in demand dates on a normal year are going to be exceptionally booked up for 2021. Um, I'm trying to set realistic expectations with some of my clients. And if you moved a spring or even a summer event to a Saturday, next spring, April, May, June, especially around DC, you got
Yeah,
to do it, and you got to lock
right.
in your videos right now, because those typically busy Saturdays now have double the number of people looking at them because of folks that had to move. And I don't think that that's something that the average event host is considering right now. So planners, venues, vendors, educate the people that you're talking to right now so that they're not left disappointed or holding a bag, in a few months because they didn't jump on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's you're 100% right on that. It was important to book the date that you want before. Now it's just becoming vital. If you're going to move your date, lock the date, and and make sure that you're not left sort of, pushing your event, into the fall of 2021,
Sure.
which nobody wants to wait that long.
Right. If you're willing to be flexible and do a Friday or a Sunday, you will have such an easier time right now
Yeah,
than trying to do it for
exactly.
such an easier time. When we had to
It's
move
going to be amazing.
Yeah, when we had to move our wedding, we purposefully moved to a Sunday in October, knowing that we loved the vendors that we already had lined up. We didn't want
Yep.
to lose folks if we could avoid it. So having it be on a Sunday, almost everybody, 95% of the key people in our vendors who are important to us are available on a Sunday. So it was a done deal.
Perfect. And we're just gonna keep, a good positive energy around like October events, because
Mhm.
nobody wants to be rescheduling anything. I've got, my next, wedding is in August. That was a reschedule. I
Yeah.
am really keeping, positive energy out there for them, that we don't have to reschedule that. And but certainly by September, October, we're just, hopefully we'll have all of this under control.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, if not behind us, at least under control.
Yeah, and I think right now part of what's so stressful for people is that there is a general timeline, but there's uncertainty around it. There is no by this date things will open. Now you can plan appropriately. So, and being understanding and
Yeah.
flexible with each other because of that, I think is gonna be key. I understand that a lot of event professionals are going to get stressed out if people are continuously pushing things, but it's only because they didn't have a definite date by which they knew it would be safe. So, be flexible with your clients if you can. Be collaborative with each other. If there's an issue that comes up, well, that we know that happens in this industry. They should just put problem solver at the end of everybody's title, right?
Right.
So be flexible with
Yeah.
each other, be kind with your clients, and just try to make it work. Just try to make it work. Whatever we were used to in terms of cancellations, this is new territory. I know that some companies don't consider this to be covered under force majeure. But I think um, if you were to take those situations to a court of law, there wouldn't be a jury in the world that wouldn't see this situation as force majeure.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there are certain policies. Certain companies are adapting certain policies that are really making my head scratch. But I think that, I mean, you know what? Not my company. So, it's like, all right, you want to, enforce non-refundable and strict adherence to all these different things. Okay, but certainly, I know my clients appreciate the stance that I've taken, and we'll just leave it at that, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that we're used to seeing people leaving reviews on places like White Wire, for example, for services that were rendered. I bet we're going to start seeing reviews on Wedding Wire, just how vendors reacted in this time,
Right.
and how they worked with their clients or didn't work with their clients. And it's a sensitive topic. Your buyers are in just as bad a spot as you are, probably. So be
Right.
aware of that. And if you're not going to work with them, they'll probably publish something about it.
I know. I know. And right. And it's just one of those, ugly situations where, I get, I get both perspectives, but I like to think of my business as a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So Jenny, I wanted to, we're almost right up against the 1 hour mark. Of course, I wanted to be appreciative of your time, respectful of your time, and everyone else out there. So I wanted to wrap up our interview with my one final question that I'm posing to everyone that I'm interviewing.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy, but also a little bit difficult. So if you can, so once everything breaks and everything opens and you can go where you want and eat what you want, where are you going and what are you eating?
Oh my goodness. Well, cooking has become a bit of a stress relief for me during this time. So I
Oh,
wouldn't
nice.
go somewhere where I could purchase something I could make for myself here in the house.
Of course.
So it would probably either be one of DC's many, many amazing sushi restaurants, or hop in the car, go out to Rehoboth once the beaches are open again, restaurants and hotels are operating again, and go to Crab House. Crab House.
Oh, yeah.
Best selections when it comes to crab legs and the options that you get. And I just freaking love Rehoboth so much. So I'm hoping that this happens in the summertime, and the weather's still nice. So I think the timing would be perfect.
Well, maybe we'll hit an Indian summer, and so even if it happens late September,
Yeah.
you're still cool.
Yep.
But I
Rehoboth
think
is
yeah.
September. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Even if it's a little bit on the cool side, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just as long as it's open. But I think that those have been the top two. You and I on the sushi. Several other people have agreed with me on the sushi, and for other people, it's steak. Like people, and I don't think that like steak is something that they can cook at home, but they want the steakhouse experience is what
Right.
they want.
Right.
So I totally understand what they're coming from, where they're coming from on that. All right, Jenny, but thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I hope that everyone, if people are out there and they, of course, want to reach out to you to either book you for future events or book one of the many, many talented people that you represent,
Okay.
let them know. Again, that's through.
Yeah, so you can find me through East Coast Entertainment. BookECE.com is our website. And you can find my band and what I do as a performer at moonshinesociety.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again so much. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend lined up. And I can't wait to see you again in person.
I know. I'm going to hug you, Trish.
I know. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. It
All
might
right,
be under 5 layers of clothing, but I'm coming for you.
all good. All good.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. See ya.
Have a great day. Have a great day.